What happens when you try to mock a judge in his own courtroom and he responds with wisdom so profound it changes your entire perspective on life? Your Honor, this is just a joke, right? Like, you can't actually send me to jail for this? Those were the words that 19-year-old Marcus Thompson thought would get him out of trouble. He had no idea he was about to receive the most humbling lesson of his young life. What Judge Frank Caprio said next would not only silence Marcus forever, but transform him into a completely different person. It was a typical Tuesday morning in Providence Municipal Court. Judge Frank Caprio had seen it all in his decades on the bench, from hardened criminals to nervous first-time offenders. But Marcus Thompson was something different. The college sophomore had been caught spray-painting graffiti on a historic building downtown, and he walked into that courtroom with the arrogance of someone who believed the rules didn't apply to him. Marcus strutted in wearing ripped jeans and a baseball cap turned backwards, chewing gum loudly and rolling his eyes at everything around him. His friends in the gallery were snickering, clearly expecting some kind of show. Mr. Thompson, Judge Caprio began in his characteristic calm tone, "You've been charged with vandalism of city property. How do you plead?" Marcus shrugged with theatrical indifference. "I guess, not guilty. I mean, it's just paint, right?" But Marcus had no idea that Judge Caprio had been watching his disrespectful behavior from the moment he entered the courtroom. The seasoned judge leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing with the kind of focus that had intimidated far more dangerous criminals than this cocky teenager. "Mr. Thompson, before we proceed, I'd like you to explain something to me. Do you think this courtroom is a joke?" Marcus laughed nervously, looking back at his friends. "Well, kind of, yeah. I mean, we're talking about some paint on a wall. It's not like I killed someone." The courtroom fell silent. Even Marcus's friends stopped laughing. Judge Caprio's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted dramatically. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Caprio said with deadly calm, "let me ask you a different question. Do you know what building you vandalized?" Marcus shrugged again, but this time with less confidence. "Some old building? I don't know, they all look the same." Judge Caprio reached under his desk and pulled out a folder. He opened it slowly, deliberately, letting the silence build in the courtroom. "The building you spray-painted, Mr. Thompson, is the Veterans Memorial Hall. It was built in 1923 to honor the 847 men and women from this community who died fighting for your freedom in World War I. Marcus's smug expression began to fade, but Judge Caprio wasn't finished. "The wall you chose for your art contains the engraved names of 19-year-olds, Mr. Thompson. Boys your exact age who never got to see their 20th birthday because they were too busy dying in French trenches so that you could have the privilege of standing in this courtroom and calling it a joke." But nobody expected what Judge Caprio would reveal next. The judge stood up from his chair, something he rarely did during proceedings. Marcus suddenly looked very small in his defendant's chair. "Mr. Thompson, among those names on that wall is Private Anthony Caprio. Age 19. Killed in action at Below Wood, June 15, 1918. Marcus's face went completely white. I didn't know. Private Anthony Caprio was my grandfather's brother, Mr. Thompson. He was supposed to come home and marry his sweetheart, take over the family business, have children of his own. Instead, he died face down in mud so that you could have the freedom to disrespect his memory." The courtroom was dead silent. Marcus's friends had stopped snickering entirely. Several people in the gallery were visibly emotional. Subscribe now and comment what you think about Judge Caprio's approach, because what happens next will completely change how you view justice and respect. Judge Caprio walked around from behind his bench and approached Marcus directly. The young man looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "Mr. Thompson, you asked me if this was a joke. Let me tell you what's not a joke. It's not a joke that young men died so you could attend college instead of a battlefield. It's not a joke that their sacrifice built the freedom you take for granted. And it's certainly not a joke when someone defaces their memorial." Marcus tried to speak, but Judge Caprio held up his hand. I'm not finished, son. You see, I could sentence you to community service. I could fine you. I could even send you to jail, which is what the prosecutor is requesting. But none of those punishments would teach you what you really need to learn. Marcus had no idea that his life was about to change completely. Judge Caprio returned to his bench but remained standing. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to make you an offer. And I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Marcus nodded weakly, no longer the cocky teenager who had walked in 20 minutes earlier. You can accept the standard sentence, 200 hours of community service, a $500 fine, and this goes on your permanent record. Or, Judge Caprio paused for dramatic effect, you can spend the next 6 months learning about every single name on that memorial wall. Marcus looked confused. I don't understand, Your Honor. I want you to research every man and woman whose name you defaced. I want you to learn their stories, their families, their dreams. I want you to understand who they were before they became names on a wall. But Judge Caprio's real challenge was still coming. And after you've learned about all 847 of them, Mr. Thompson, you're going to stand in front of their families, the ones still living. And you're going to tell them their loved one's story. Not read it from a paper, but tell it like you knew them personally. Marcus's jaw dropped. All of them? But that's impossible. Some of those families probably aren't even alive anymore. Judge Caprio smiled for the first time since the hearing began. Then you'll visit their graves, son. And you'll tell their stories to their headstones. Because the dead deserve respect too. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. No one had ever heard of such an unusual sentence. Your Honor, Marcus's court-appointed lawyer interjected, this is highly irregular. What's irregular, Judge Caprio said firmly, is a young man having so little respect for sacrifice that he treats a war memorial like his personal canvas. What Judge Caprio said next would become legendary in legal circles. Mr. Thompson, here's what I believe about justice. Real justice isn't just punishment, it's education. It's transformation. You came into my courtroom thinking this was a joke because you don't understand the weight of what you did. Judge Caprio walked closer to Marcus again. Those names aren't just names, son. They represent 847 families who got telegrams saying their children weren't coming home. 847 Christmas dinners with empty chairs. 847 futures that never happened. Marcus was visibly shaking now. Your Honor, I'm sorry. I really am. I believe you are, Mr. Thompson. But sorry isn't enough. Understanding is what matters. Respect is what matters. Judge Caprio returned to his position behind the bench. So what's it going to be? 6 months of research and storytelling, or standard sentencing? Marcus looked back at his friends, who were no longer smirking. He looked at his lawyer, who shrugged. Then he looked directly at Judge Caprio. I'll do the research, Your Honor. All of it. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished with his lesson. Good choice, Mr. Thompson. But let me be clear about the rules. You'll report to me every 2 weeks with updates on your progress. You'll document every story, every family you meet, every grave you visit. And if you miss even one appointment or show up unprepared, you go straight to standard sentencing with no second chances. Marcus nodded eagerly. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. Do you, Mr. Thompson? Do you really understand what I'm asking you to do? Judge Caprio leaned forward, his voice becoming more intense. I'm asking you to carry the weight of 847 stories. I'm asking you to become a guardian of memory for people you never met. I'm asking you to transform from someone who defaces history into someone who preserves it. Nobody expected Marcus's response to what came next. Judge Caprio pulled out a small, worn photograph from his jacket pocket. This is Private Anthony Caprio, my great-uncle. 19 years old, just like you. He was supposed to inherit my great-grandfather's bakery. Instead, he died holding a piece of ground in France that most Americans can't even pronounce. Marcus stared at the photograph, tears beginning to form in his eyes. I want you to understand something, Mr. Thompson. Every name on that wall has a story like Anthony's. Every name represents dreams unfulfilled, families shattered, futures stolen by war. And you painted over them like they meant nothing. Judge Caprio put the photograph back in his pocket. But here's what you're going to discover over the next 6 months, they meant everything. And by the time you're finished, they're going to mean everything to you too. Marcus wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Your Honor, how am I supposed to find information about people who died over 100 years ago? Judge Caprio smiled again, this time with warmth instead of stern authority. That's the point, son. It's not supposed to be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. The transformation that followed would shock everyone who knew Marcus Thompson. Mr. Thompson, Judge Caprio continued, let me tell you what's going to happen to you over the next 6 months. You're going to spend hours in libraries, digging through military records and newspaper archives. You're going to knock on doors of elderly residents, asking them about their grandfathers and great-uncles. Marcus listened intently, no longer the disrespectful teenager who had entered the courtroom. You're going to visit cemeteries in the rain, searching for weathered headstones. You're going to read letters written by boys who knew they might never come home. And slowly, Mr. Thompson, you're going to understand what sacrifice really means. Judge Caprio stood up once more. But most importantly, you're going to learn that history isn't just dates and names in textbooks. It's real people who lived, loved, and died for something bigger than themselves. Share this video if you think Judge Caprio's approach to justice is what our society needs more of, because his final words to Marcus will stay with you long after this video ends. Mr. Thompson, Judge Caprio said in his final address to the young man, I'm going to make you a prediction. 6 months from now, when you come back to my courtroom to present your findings, you won't be the same person who walked in here today. Marcus looked up with genuine curiosity. What do you mean, Your Honor? I mean you'll understand that freedom isn't free. You'll understand that respect isn't optional. And you'll understand that being young doesn't excuse ignorance, it just makes learning more important. Judge Caprio gathered his papers, preparing to close the hearing. When you leave this courtroom today, Mr. Thompson, you have a choice. You can see this as punishment, or you can see this as the greatest education you'll ever receive. Marcus stood up, his posture completely different from when he'd entered. Your Honor, I want to ask you something. Go ahead, son. Why are you giving me this chance? Why not just send me to jail like everyone expects? Judge Caprio paused, considering his words carefully. Because jail would teach you to fear consequences, Mr. Thompson. But what I'm giving you will teach you to honor sacrifice. And our society needs more people who understand the difference. The young man who left that courtroom was completely transformed. As Marcus gathered his things to leave, Judge Caprio called out one final time. Mr. Thompson, one more thing. Marcus turned around. Yes, Your Honor. When you're researching those 847 stories, I want you to ask yourself one question every single day, what would I have done if I were them? Would I have had the courage to leave everything behind and fight for something greater than myself? Marcus nodded solemnly. I will, Your Honor. I promise. Good. Because the answer to that question will determine what kind of man you become. 6 months later, Marcus Thompson returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom. But he wasn't alone. He brought with him dozens of elderly family members of the fallen soldiers, historical documentation that filled 3 large binders, and a completely transformed perspective on life, sacrifice, and respect. The presentation lasted 4 hours. Marcus had not only researched every name but had created a comprehensive digital memorial that would preserve their stories forever. Several family members wept as they heard their relatives' stories told with such reverence and detail. Judge Caprio's unconventional sentence had accomplished something that traditional punishment never could, it had turned a disrespectful vandal into a passionate historian and guardian of memory. The lesson was profound and lasting. True justice doesn't just punish wrongdoing, it transforms the wrongdoer into someone capable of making things right. But the impact of Judge Caprio's decision reached far beyond that courtroom. Word of the unusual sentence spread quickly through social media. Videos of Marcus presenting his research went viral, garnering millions of views worldwide. Legal scholars began debating whether restorative education could become a new standard in the justice system. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a criminology professor at Brown University, wrote in her analysis, "Judge Caprio didn't just sentence a young man, he created a scholar, historian, and most importantly, a guardian of memory. This case will be studied in law schools for decades." Meanwhile, Marcus had become something no one expected. Within a year of his sentencing, Marcus had changed his college major from business to history. He established a non-profit organization called Stories Behind the Names, dedicated to preserving the memories of fallen veterans whose stories had been forgotten by time. His first major project was digitizing and cataloging military records from World War I, making them accessible to families searching for information about their ancestors. The database he created became the most comprehensive resource of its kind on the East Coast. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in Marcus himself. The young man who once spray-painted over memorial walls now spent his weekends cleaning veteran grave sites and organizing memorial services. He had developed relationships with dozens of elderly veterans and their families, becoming their unofficial historian and advocate. Mrs. Dorothy Castellano, whose grandfather's name Marcus had researched, became particularly close to him. "When Marcus first knocked on my door, I thought he was just some college kid doing a school project," she recalled. "But when he started telling me stories about my grandfather that even I had never heard, I knew this was something special." The transformation was so complete that Judge Caprio decided to check on Marcus's progress personally. 2 years after the original sentencing, Judge Caprio made an unannounced visit to one of Marcus's memorial presentations. Hidden in the back of the crowd, he watched as the young man he had sentenced spoke passionately about Private James Murphy, a 20-year-old who had died at the Battle of Cantigny. James Murphy wasn't just a soldier, Marcus told the assembled crowd. He was a son who wrote letters to his mother every week, promising to bring her back a souvenir from France. He was a brother who taught his younger sister how to ride a bicycle before he shipped out. He was a young man with dreams of becoming a teacher after the war. Judge Caprio found himself wiping away tears as he listened to Marcus speak with such reverence and knowledge about someone he had never met but had come to know intimately through months of research. After the presentation, Judge Caprio approached Marcus privately. "Mr. Thompson," he said, tapping the young man on the shoulder. Marcus turned around and his face lit up with recognition and respect. "Judge Caprio. I didn't know you were here. What did you think of the presentation?" "I think, Marcus," the judge said, using his first name for the first time, "that you've become exactly the kind of man this world needs more of." Marcus smiled humbly. "You changed my life, Your Honor. That day in your courtroom was the day I finally understood what it means to respect something bigger than yourself." Judge Caprio nodded approvingly. "But you did the work, son. I just pointed you in the right direction." The conversation that followed revealed just how profound the transformation had been. "Judge Caprio, I need to tell you something," Marcus said, his voice becoming more serious. "When I first walked into your courtroom, I was angry at the world. I thought everyone was against me, that rules were just ways to keep young people down." The judge listened intently as Marcus continued. "But when you told me about your great-uncle Anthony, something clicked. I realized that my problems were nothing compared to what those young men faced. They didn't get to complain about unfairness, they just did what needed to be done." Judge Caprio put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "And what did you learn from that realization?" "I learned that freedom comes with responsibility. That privilege comes with obligation. And that the best way to honor the past is to make the present worthy of their sacrifice." The judge's final words to Marcus would become part of both their legacies. "Marcus, when I sentenced you that day, I wasn't sure if my gamble would pay off. I had never tried anything like that before. But I saw something in you, a spark that just needed the right fuel to become a fire. Marcus listened with the same intensity he had shown during his research presentations. You've proven that justice isn't about punishment, it's about transformation. You've shown that respect isn't something you're born with, it's something you earn through understanding. And you've demonstrated that one person, properly motivated, can preserve the memories of hundreds. Judge Caprio paused, looking out at the memorial wall that had started everything. But most importantly, Marcus, you've taught me something too. You've taught me that sometimes the most powerful sentence a judge can impose isn't jail time or community service, it's education. Real education that touches the heart, not just the mind. Years later, the case would still be cited as a landmark in restorative justice. Marcus Thompson eventually became Dr. Marcus Thompson, earning his Ph.D. in military history. His doctoral dissertation, Names on Stone, The Forgotten Stories of Local War Memorials, was published by Yale University Press and became required reading in several graduate programs. He married Dorothy Castellano's granddaughter, whom he met during his research, and they named their first son Anthony, after Judge Caprio's great-uncle whose story had changed everything. Judge Caprio, now retired, would often point to the Marcus Thompson case when asked about his philosophy of justice. Some people come into your courtroom needing punishment, he would say. Others come in needing purpose. The art of being a judge is knowing the difference. The Veterans Memorial Hall now features a plaque recognizing Marcus's research and dedication. But more importantly, it serves as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful lesson isn't about consequences, it's about understanding the weight of what came before us and our responsibility to carry it forward. The young man who once defaced history had become one of its most passionate guardians. And the judge who took a chance on transformation over punishment had proven that justice, at its best, doesn't just correct behavior, it changes hearts.